The 19th of December 2025, Venezuela. 303 billion barrels. That's more oil than Saudi Arabia, Iraq, and Kuwait combined. Sitting in a country where grocery stores are empty, hospitals lack medicine, and nearly 8 million people have already fled. And here's what nobody wants to say out loud. The United States isn't preparing to invade Venezuela to save it. They're preparing to invade because letting it collapse into the wrong hands could destroy American power for a generation. This isn't about Maduro. It's not even really about drugs or refugees, despite what the press releases claim. Today, we're breaking down the hidden calculations, the resource deposits, the geographic nightmare, and the brutal math that makes invasion look less like aggression and more like strategic necessity. Because when you see the numbers, one thing becomes crystal clear. Venezuela isn't just another failing state. It's a ticking time bomb that could reshape global power if it explodes in the wrong direction. On paper, America doesn't need Venezuelan oil. Thanks to fracking, the US produces over 13 million barrels daily and became a net energy exporter years ago. So why does Washington still obsess over Venezuela's reserves? Here's the brutal truth. America doesn't need to pump Venezuelan oil. It needs to control who does. Venezuela holds 303 billion barrels of proven crude reserves, 17.7% of the planet's total supply. That's 11 times larger than all US reserves combined. More than Russia, more than Iran, more than anyone except possibly the Saudis, and even they come in second at 267 billion. But here's the strategic part most analysts miss. This isn't about volume. It's about the petrodollar system, the invisible mechanism that forces most of the world to buy oil in US dollars, creating artificial demand for American currency and keeping the dollar as the global reserve. If China and Russia gain control of Venezuela's output, they could offer discounted crude to developing nations in yuan or rubles. One analyst I spoke with put it bluntly. If Venezuela starts selling 2 million barrels a day outside the dollar system, the entire petrodollar framework could unravel in 24 months. The implications are staggering. The dollar's reserve status allows America to print money without triggering hyperinflation because global demand absorbs it. Lose that, and US debt becomes unsustainable overnight. Venezuela's oil isn't just energy. It's the linchpin of American monetary dominance. And there's another angle. Venezuelan crude is extremely heavy, so thick it barely flows without being blended with lighter fuels. But that's exactly what Gulf Coast refineries in Texas and Louisiana were designed to process. Billions in American infrastructure sitting idle because sanctions cut off the one supply that makes economic sense. Control Venezuela's oil, and America doesn't just secure energy independence, it secures the architecture of global finance itself. Oil isn't even the full story. Beneath Venezuela's southern forests lies something potentially more valuable in 2025's geopolitical landscape. The minerals that power artificial intelligence, advanced weaponry, and next-generation electronics start with gold. Estimates put Venezuela's untapped gold reserves at roughly 8,000 tons, concentrated in the Arco Minero mining belt south of the Orinoco River. If those estimates hold, we're talking about potentially the largest undeveloped gold deposit on Earth. But here's where it gets more interesting and more dangerous. Coltan. This bluish-black mineral is absolutely essential for manufacturing capacitors used in smartphones, laptops, missiles, and critically the server farms running AI systems. Venezuela's deposits are believed to be enormous, rivaling those in the Congo. In a world racing to dominate artificial intelligence, coltan isn't just valuable, it's irreplaceable. China currently controls roughly 80% of global rare earth processing. If Beijing also locks up Venezuelan coltan through debt trap infrastructure deals, they'd achieve near monopoly control over the supply chain for advanced semiconductors. The Pentagon knows this, the State Department knows this. And that knowledge creates a terrifying strategic calculation. Letting Venezuela's mineral wealth fall into rival hands could mean losing the AI race and, by extension, losing the century. Then there's thorium, the nuclear fuel that could power next-generation reactors more safely than uranium. Venezuela is estimated to hold the world's second-largest thorium reserves. In an era of energy transition and climate agreements, thorium could be the key to clean, abundant power. Add it all up. Oil that props up the dollar, gold that could destabilize currencies, rare earths that enable AI dominance, and thorium for energy independence. Venezuela isn't just resource-rich. It's a strategic jackpot that America cannot afford to let rivals claim. One former Pentagon planner told me, "If we're being honest, Venezuela represents the last great grab for resources before everything gets locked up by spheres of influence." Miss this window, and we're stuck begging China for chip materials in 2035. Geography matters. And Venezuela's location creates a security scenario the United States hasn't faced since the Cuban Missile Crisis, only potentially worse. From Caracas to Miami, approximately 1,400 miles. Flight time for a modern military aircraft under 3 hours. Now imagine Russia and Iran establishing permanent military infrastructure at that distance. Not as speculation as established fact. By late 2025, intelligence confirms Russian S-300VM air defense systems deployed across multiple Venezuelan sites. Iranian drone technology and anti-ship missiles delivered under bilateral agreements. Submarine maintenance support from Russian technicians keeping Venezuela's aging diesel-electric fleet operational. Electronic surveillance stations potentially capable of monitoring U.S. naval movements throughout the Gulf of Mexico and Caribbean. The implications go beyond immediate military threat. Venezuela is becoming a forward operating base for American adversaries in the Western Hemisphere. Remember the Monroe Doctrine, the 19th century policy declaring that European powers had no business meddling in the Americas? That principle never died, it just went quiet during the unipolar moment after the Cold War. Now, with great power competition returning, Washington finds itself facing exactly what the Monroe Doctrine was designed to prevent: hostile powers establishing military presence in America's strategic backyard. But here's the nightmare scenario that keeps Pentagon planners awake: advanced anti-access area denial. AD systems. If Russia fully integrates its air defense networks with Venezuelan radar installations, they could create a protective bubble, making it costly for U.S. forces to operate in the southern Caribbean. That matters enormously. If America ever needs to project power into South America, secure the Panama Canal, or most critically, prevent further Russian and Chinese expansion across Latin America. One senior defense analyst described it to me this way: "It's not about Venezuela attacking Florida. It's about Venezuela becoming the node in a network that degrades our ability to operate freely in our own hemisphere." That's strategically intolerable. Numbers don't lie. And the numbers coming out of Venezuela tell a story of civilizational collapse on a scale rarely seen outside wartime. As of mid-2025, an estimated 7.9 million Venezuelans have fled their country, making it the second largest refugee crisis in the world after Syria. Let that sink in. Roughly 30% of Venezuela's population has left. That's equivalent to 100 million Americans abandoning the United States. Where did they go? Colombia hosts 2.5 million. Peru nearly 2 million. Brazil, Chile, Ecuador, and Caribbean nations absorbed hundreds of thousands more. And crucially, over 800,000 have reached the United States, with tens of thousands more arriving at the southern border monthly. The fiscal cost to American cities is staggering. New York City alone spent over $2 billion in 2024 providing shelter, healthcare, and services to migrants, many of them Venezuelan. Chicago, Denver, and other sanctuary cities face similar burdens, stretching municipal budgets to breaking points. But here's where the calculation gets truly cynical and potentially decisive. Every month Maduro remains in power, another 50,000 to 100,000 Venezuelans attempt the journey north. That flow destabilizes transit countries, overwhelms border processing, and creates domestic political crises in the United States that make governance nearly impossible. From a cold strategic perspective, the math is brutal. Option A: spend $100 billion invading, toppling Maduro, installing a transitional government, and beginning reconstruction. Stabilize Venezuela in 3 to 5 years. Migration stops at the source. Option B: spend $1 trillion over the next decade managing an endless refugee crisis, building detention facilities, fighting political battles over immigration, watching American cities strain under the weight, and dealing with the social fractures this creates, while Venezuela continues to be a wound hemorrhaging people and becoming more chaotic. One congressional staffer put it to me this way: "We're going to pay for Venezuela one way or another. The question is whether we pay to fix it or pay to contain the consequences of letting it rot." And there's a darker dimension. Some strategists now talk about migration as a weaponizable crisis, the idea that hostile powers could deliberately exacerbate refugee flows to destabilize Western nations. Whether intentional or not, Venezuela's collapse is achieving exactly that effect. The humanitarian crisis isn't just a tragedy. It's becoming a strategic weapon pointed at America's soft underbelly. While the world focuses on military posturing, a quieter conquest is already underway. Venezuela owes China approximately $60 billion debts accumulated over years of loans secured by oil shipments. The terms are crushing. Venezuela must ship hundreds of thousands of barrels daily to China at below-market rates just to service interest. Beijing isn't just a creditor, it's become Venezuela's economic master through debt. And here's what terrifies Washington. If Maduro falls and a new government rediges on Chinese debt, Beijing could demand direct control over oil fields, ports, and refineries as collateral. We've seen this playbook in Africa and Central Asia. Venezuela could be next. The nightmare scenario. A Chinese state oil company operating Venezuela's fields, Chinese firms controlling critical infrastructure, and Chinese military advisors protecting their investments. Venezuela transformed into a Chinese economic colony 1,400 miles from Florida. The question isn't whether America can tolerate Maduro, it's whether America can tolerate China owning Venezuela's future. Let's compile what we know. Strategic resources: 303 billion barrels of oil. Dollar system protection: 8,000 tons of gold. Currency hedge: coltan and rare earths. AI dominance: thorium. Energy future: geopolitical threat: Russian air defenses 3 hours from Florida. Iranian drones and missiles. Electronic surveillance compromising U.S. operations. Permanent hostile presence in Western Hemisphere. Economic calculation: $60 billion. Chinese debt trap tightening. Petrodollar system under threat. Gulf Coast refineries idling without Venezuelan crude. $100 billion invasion versus $1 trillion refugee management. Humanitarian cover: 7.9 million refugees and counting. 400 to 550% projected inflation for 2025. Total state collapse inevitable. Liberation narrative already written. The pattern is unmistakable. Every element necessary to justify and execute regime change is falling into place. The resource incentives, the security threat, the economic calculation, the humanitarian pretext. What's missing is only the trigger, the incident that makes inaction politically impossible and intervention politically necessary. We've laid out the strategic realities. Venezuela represents the intersection of every nightmare scenario American planners face. Hostile powers in the hemisphere, refugee crises destabilizing allies, critical resources under rival control, and the slow-motion collapse of a state that could become either a Chinese vassal or a failed narco-state. The calculus is brutal but clear. Do nothing, and watch Venezuela become a wound that never heals, bleeding refugees, empowering adversaries, and demonstrating American impotence. Act decisively and solve multiple problems simultaneously while seizing strategic assets that could secure American dominance for decades. Will it happen? The naval forces are positioned, the legal groundwork is laid, the propaganda narratives, drugs, refugees, human rights are already circulating. All that's needed is the spark. And sparks, in a crisis this volatile, have a way of appearing exactly when they're needed. What do you think? Is America preparing for an inevitable intervention, or is this just another case of overblown military posturing? Drop your take in the comments, and if you found this analysis valuable, make sure you're subscribed. Because when this situation moves, it's going to move fast, and we'll be here breaking down exactly what it means for you. Next time, why Argentina's south remains mysteriously empty and what that reveals about geopolitical strategy.